A twisted case out of South Florida and a murder mystery. We're diving into the past of a man that police say stabbed a teenager to death inside a luxury high-rise condo in Miami as he slept. And the victim, according to police, was a random target. The suspect is also now dead. Police say he fell hundreds of feet to his death shortly after the murder. On the outside, it appears that this suspect, at least at one point, had a good job. But I'll tell you why his former landlord told a TV station that he reminded him of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. As people are trying to figure out his past, people are also honoring the life that he took.
My name is Dominic Ferrell. I started St. Peter and Paul when I was 13 years old.
That is the victim. And another tragic twist in this story, it appears that young man who lost his life was not supposed to be inside the condo the night of the murder. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. There are so many questions that need to be answered in the story that I'm about to tell you as police are investigating a murder that happened in a high-rise condo in a ritzy part of Miami over the weekend. Police say early Sunday morning, 17-year-old Dominic Ferrell was stabbed to death as he slept in his bed inside a 34th floor condo in the Brickell neighborhood of Miami. Now, this is the condo building. According to Google Maps, it's called the Icon. And this is a property that has more than one tower on it, and it is home to units that go for more than $1 million on the market. A lot of the units are also rented out on Airbnb, so it's a very transient place in terms of who is typically inside these buildings. No matter what, this was a brutal murder. It was a tragic murder because of the life lost. But what is making it even scarier for the people who live inside this condo building is that police say it was completely random. This is the person who police say killed Dominic, 26-year-old Kyrill Kehl. Now, police say on surveillance video from inside the Icon, they see Kehl in the building lobby overnight in the early hours of Sunday. Two people with key fobs then come into the building. They gain access through the lobby, and then Kehl follows them through to gain access to the building. Police say that Kehl then went up to the 47th floor, and that is when they say he started to try to open doors. Then, around 2:16 in the morning, according to police, Kehl opened the door to Dominic's apartment on the 34th floor. The door was unlocked. Shortly after that, police say that Kehl stabbed Dominic to death. Police recovered several knives in the apartment. Police have said that Kehl and Dominic did not know each other, and the only reason they believe that Kehl ended up inside that condo is because Dominic's door was open. Now, we looked into the past of Kyrill Kehl, and there's a lot to unpack, and it is not what I was expecting. His LinkedIn profile shows that he worked for military contractor Northrop Grumman from March 2022 to September of 2024. He also graduated from Arizona State University with a degree in business in December of 2021. He claims to be proficient in German, Chinese, Italian, and Spanish. And we also found this GoFundMe that he appears to have started when it seems that he was traveling across India. He said the money raised would help him continue his, quote, journey of researching ancient cultures and to buy blankets and clothing for people in need. The same man who police in Miami say brutally stabbed a teenager to death at random apparently wrote, quote, even in the most abject poverty, I have seen people pull together to compassionately support one another over generations, reflecting their commitment to their entire community. In the West, the land of plenty for most, we often lack many of the core values that seem to make their difficult situation not only bearable, but contented and whole. I have witnessed in them a strong sense of community with respect, fairness, responsibility, trust, and deep caring for one another. We will never know, in Kehl's own words, why he killed Dominic Ferrell and why he went into that high-rise condo in the early hours of Sunday morning, because Kehl died shortly after that murder. Police say they followed a path of blood from the Icon to a building that was under construction across the street, and that is where they found Kehl dead. He had fallen more than 100 feet to his death. At this point, it's unclear if he knew that the fall was coming or if he intentionally jumped. But also, he had apparently scared several people inside of this building prior to the murder of Dominic Ferrell. One couple who was staying at the Icon at an Airbnb told WPLG-TV that they saw Kehl the night of the murder. The couple said that Kehl was standing in a stairwell. He was carrying a fire extinguisher, and they said his eyes were wide open and he seemed out of it. The couple ran away from Kehl, they say, and they say that he was following them up the stairs, in their words, skipping. They say they ran back to their unit and they locked their door and didn't find out about what happened to Dominic Ferrell until the next morning. Police say they're still waiting on toxicology results to see if there was anything in Kehl's system the night of the attack. But according to a former landlord of the killer, this guy was reportedly giving people the creeps, to say the least, long before last weekend. That landlord spoke to WSVN TV in Miami. He said that he rented an apartment to Kehl last year for just a few months, and what a wild couple of months it was for this landlord. He told the TV station, quote, "I had this weird inkling feeling of like Dahmer. I literally had this thought like, oh my God, we're dealing with Dahmer here. Jeffrey Dahmer vibes. I just had these instincts that told me this guy is not a good guy." Jeffrey Dahmer, of course, was the serial killer and cannibal who killed and dismembered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. Dahmer kept parts of his victims in his refrigerator inside his apartment in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which makes the next part of what the landlord told WSVN in many ways even more chilling. That landlord also said the apartment was a mess when Kehl lived there, and that he kept large packs of meat in his fridge with maggots all over the place, and he said the smell was just awful. And Kehl also kept an automatic rifle in the unit, according to the landlord, that he would keep behind a Venetian blind. This landlord said all of this, yes, it was creepy, but at the time, he and his business partner didn't really think of it as illegal. Not just did they compare Kyrill Kehl to one of the most horrific killers in history, they said from the start there was something wrong about him. The other landlord of the complex talked to WTVJ TV in Miami, and they said, quote, "It didn't take me until about the second time I met him that I encountered him that there was something really, really, really wrong, and it didn't settle right with me. We kind of just got the ick." Now, police have not said any more about his behavior or background beyond the fact that he came to Miami just days before the murder and that he was traveling from Arizona. But it appears that Kehl has lived in several different locations. On his LinkedIn, it says that his home is Sunnyvale, which is in Northern California in the Bay Area. The GoFundMe listed his home as Napa, also in Northern California. So it has seemed like he has bounced around to several places in recent years. And according to those landlords in Miami Beach, he lived there last year for at least a couple of months. And again, we don't know what would cause him to go to the Icon, that high-rise condo in Brickell in Miami, go up to the 34th floor and attack, according to police, a random person in their sleep. Now, we have yet to hear further from police about that part of the investigation, whether Kehl had any mental health issues or was he on some sort of medication that could have turned him into a killer. Now, again, we're waiting for that toxicology result to come back. It's unclear whether Kehl had a mental health condition that was diagnosed or he was someone who was more than just a creepy tenant. He was someone who was capable of just being an evil person, a killer. We're still waiting to learn more about that part of this story. As for the victim, Dominic Ferrell, just 17 years old, a new twist in this story that in some ways makes it even more tragic is, according to court records, he should never have been inside that condo the night of his death. Court records also show this week Dominic's mom filed an order to get her son's body for a service and a burial.
My name is Dominic Ferrell. I started St. Peter and Paul when I was 13 years old in 8th grade. My best memory has been being dropped off at school with my family to support me. And St. Peter and Paul means happiness to me because it supported me gaining friends.
This is a video that Dominic's middle school put out on social media announcing his death. The 17-year-old's LinkedIn, which at 17 to even have a LinkedIn, says about the drive that this 17-year-old had. It showed that he had recently started a dog walking business, and he also wrote that he's an investor and an enthusiast in artificial intelligence development and global markets and economies. Big words for someone so young, but someone who obviously had big dreams for the future. In fact, a memorial post on mykeeper.com showed that he had big plans and dreamed of one day owning a business, one day moving to New York, and one day going to the University of Florida in Gainesville. That was his goal. But his life was taken in what the poster calls a senseless, selfish act. Joining us now to talk more about this case is retired NYPD detective and co-host of the Gold Shields podcast, Tom Smith. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. This is a story where there's just a lot of very interesting angles, a lot to unpack. What are some of the biggest questions you have so far?
The access and who this individual is, compared to or, linked up with the victim and the family. It's very bizarre, and you nailed it. The access, the way it was performed, his actions afterwards, all that is leading to a just large question of why. What's the whole point in this? Not that there's any point in any crime, but this one in particular, you want to really nail down what's going on here.
Yeah, and he has this weird background where he was, Northrop is a strong company to work for. He's traveling to India trying to raise money for kids, and you're just wondering how it got to this point. When you have a case like this where this person is kind of an enigma, where do you start to piece together their background?
Well, that's what you do. You just work backwards. You go from the point of time that you arrest the individual, and then just work backwards with every part of and every aspect you can think of regarding his background. A criminal history, mental history, family, traveling. Any social media footprint that he might have. All leads into trying to figure out who this individual is and what may have been the motive, because of something in his background that may, jump out to investigators.
And just the dynamics of this, it's terrifying for the people who live in this building that this person would gain access to their building. And in Brickell, in a luxury place like this, you probably pay a pretty penny for the security team at this complex, and that didn't work out. And then he's just pulling on doors to go his way down, beyond just lock your door, which is this is a tragic reminder about that. What stands out to you about I guess just for the people in the building waking up and knowing that this happened?
Well, where's the security team?
Yeah.
Who's covering that building, making sure the occupants in that building are safe? Where are they? Who's manning any cameras that are in the area? Any CCTV cameras that are inside, outside, pointing at the building, anything like that. Security is something that you hope is part of the deal when you go into living in one of these complexes. It's part of it. It's probably part of the reason some of the people chose to live in this building. But then when you have a total breakdown and failure of that system, it's not good. It's not good for the company who's there or the residential owners.
And Miami police have said they're going to wait on the toxicology reports and they're hoping that report will give them a better understanding of this suspect. What could have been going on? Was it a mental health issue, or was it a problem where he was taking drugs? In your experience, when it comes to narcotics, is there something that somebody could take that would turn them into this type of person? Like, how likely is it that there was something in his system that potentially could lead him to do something like this?
I wouldn't rely totally on a narcotic. I would rely on the narcotic and his mental instability. Those two combinations can, become a circus in some people's minds and lead them to do many things that maybe normally they wouldn't. But I wouldn't just pick one particular instance in this. I think it's a combination of a few.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how that comes forward. This story is getting a lot of attention for a lot of different reasons, but a very chilling part of this is police say it was completely random. These two people did not know each other, and it just was the bad luck that he opens a door that happened to be open, and the 17-year-old was inside sleeping, and he's stabbed to death. How do you, I guess, is there any way to make sense of this? You've covered worked a lot of difficult cases in your career, and there are people in this apartment complex who I mean, they're probably thinking to themselves, and gosh, if they were one of the doors that he pulled that it was locked, how do we make sense of a story like this?
You don't. Unfortunately, some things just happen, Chris, and that's not good or bad, but there's things in life that just happen and situations just arise. And this is just one of those of a random person pulling on doors and happen to get one that's opened. It's heartbreaking that it ends up being this way, but some things are just unexplainable and you can't make sense of it and you never will. There's not going to be, conviction, all that is not going to deter from just the horrible circumstances that led up to this.
I know it's so difficult. And then there was a new development that came in overnight that there was some sort of custody battle going on between the victim's parents, Dominic Ferrell's parents. He should not have been, according to the law, at that condo that night because there was a restraining order on his father that was set to expire shortly. But when you look at custody cases, and I know this is one, it's difficult to say that, that would have made, I guess it's one of those things we can't really make sense of, but just, I guess, have you ever seen a custody case just end in this kind of way?
No, no. I mean, you've seen custody cases that end in tragic events, no doubt about it, because of one particular party, thinking this is the end of their life and so on and so forth. But in this instance, when it's a stranger that just invades a residence and takes the life of someone in the middle of a custody battle is very strange. But it is something, listen, when you're an investigator and you're looking at circumstances like this, nothing's off the table. So they're going to do some sort of a dive into, the circumstances around the separation in their marriage and maybe pull a couple of things from each parent as well, just to check the box and make sure there are no connections whatsoever with this individual or either parent.
Right, because that is the part of it where I think we all try to make sense of what's going on. But for authorities, they look at the surveillance video, they say he was hanging out in the lobby. He then goes and he was on different floors and he was pulling on doors. And police see that and they say that this was totally random. Even if a police officer says at the beginning of an investigation that this is what we believed happened, what's going on behind the scenes to make sure that there wasn't something a little bit deeper than what we're seeing on the outside?
Yeah, when you start an investigation like this, there's nothing wrong with theorizing what happened because that kind of gets the investigation going into what you're thinking occurred. But under no circumstances do you close out any other possibilities when it comes to a case. When it's something like this, everything is open, everyone's on the table, and everyone involved is going to be looked at because you have to do that. It's a due diligence of an investigator to make sure you don't miss anything and nothing is unchecked.
And then just lastly for you, Tom, and I know we've talked about it before, because I think of the family members of this young man. He was 17, had a bright future, and this is a tragic case where it's very difficult to try to make sense of how all this could happen. If you're the police officer, you're talking to this family, how do you deliver that news?
It is, I think I said it on one of your shows recently. It's the hardest thing to do as a detective is to notify a family member that one of their loved ones is dead. And this is no different. And it's just a way to present it. And unfortunately, a lot of times the family member will figure it out before you actually get the words out, which helps to a point, but it is the most difficult thing to do. And it's just done in a comforting way, as comforting as you can be, and just realizing what is going on and what they just lost, and put yourself in their shoes of how you would want someone to tell you about it. And you have to take all that into account, but it's the hardest thing to do.
And one more actually for you, because I think of the civil side of this, and you have these expensive condo buildings in the heart of Miami. You have the security that should have been there. There were key fobs letting people go through. And there's probably going to be some lawsuits. From a police standpoint, though you're working on the criminal side, is there any interaction you have with, say, the family's lawyers if they are looking to file a lawsuit because theoretically the security should have stopped this guy from getting in?
Well, the only part we would have, or any detective or law enforcement agency, would be kind of after the fact of what you found out. like during the course of the investigation, did you find this was laxed or this wasn't done or some sort of, culpable inaction by the building or the security team was at fault? So that'll come later on in this, but I can assure you, as you just said, there's going to be a lawsuit down the line.
Absolutely. Retired NYPD Detective Tom Smith, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Chris. Thanks again.
Again, there are still so many questions in this story that we will continue to follow, and we will keep you posted with the very latest. So stick with us here on Law and Crime. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.